everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. I'm your host, Jazz FM. If you're new to the Magical Learning Podcast, the Magical Learning Podcast is where we have conversations about important topics in business and life, but we try to have fun with it. We know that when you have fun, the information tends to stick a little more, so we tend to lean into that. Today actually is another author corner in which our resident author and Director of Learning, Danette Fenton-Menzies, chats with another author about their book. Danette is an adaptability expert and has recently released The Adaptable Leader, and so she's chatting to other authors who are releasing stuff. And today we're talking to Chris Smith, former pilot and counsellor, but he's done so much more than that. Now, Danette did have a great conversation with Chris Smith. However, her audio didn't really work, so I loved the conversation though, and I thought Chris really brought a lot. So I'm just going to edit myself in as Danette. You may see Danette sort of pop in here and there, but the audio wasn't very good until the very end, which magically Danette's audio fixed itself. So I've saved that bit at the end. But otherwise, I'm essentially just going to be repeating what Danette said, and Chris will be responding as the conversation went on. I hope you have a magical week, and I hope you enjoy this. And so without further ado, here is our conversation with Chris Smith. Today, we're joined by the wonderful Chris Smith. Chris's book is Leading at 43,000 Feet, which was an amazing book. Chris, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself for listeners that are being introduced to you for the first time?
It's such a pleasure to be here, really. And, I've just finished my active flying career last year. And I always wanted to move into, from one career I've loved into another. And it's happened without letting go of the previous one, because I now...
Awesome, Zach.
Oh, I'm just so happy. And I've actually been able to write about my career and what I've learned. But look, I grew up in Toowoomba. I had a wonderful family, to be honest. And, one of my strongest memories as the youngest of four boys, as a little boy sitting around the dining room table thinking anything's possible. Now, what incredible parents, anything's possible. And that's the way we were brought up. And initially, but when you leave school, of course, we really don't know what's going on in the world a lot. And I started doing architecture and quantity surveying to move in with our family building business. Well, I soon found out I really didn't want to do that. And my true love was to go flying, and because it was either or.
Yep.
And I'm so glad I took that leap and said, no, just do what you want to do. Love it, So that's what I did. And it just, now I can look back and think, I'm glad I took that risk, because it really wasn't a risk. It was a risk in name only. The risk was that you ended up doing something you don't want to do. And my parents were fully engaged and really encouraged us no matter what we wanted to do. So that was the start of it into what was, I guess, aviation is a very different career. It's not accounting. It's not any of those sorts of things. There's nothing sadder than someone that doesn't have a go. Yeah. So away I went, and it took me to places I'd never imagined. I used to dream as a little boy of flying, funnily enough. And here it is, we made it happen. And so I did that, learned to fly privately, then got all the little jobs that you get to scratch to get your hours and so forth, and until you get some breaks. And we were the first, Coast Watch pilots around the north coast of Australia.
Yep.
We were the early ones of those with no high-tech equipment. We had nothing really. And then I end up in WA with a customs contract. We were chasing fed income drug runners over there. That was at 21 years of age, And I thought, wow, it's 3:00 in the morning. I'm 200 miles out of the Indian Ocean shadowing a ship. And I thought, oh, this is quite extraordinary. Then I joined Ansett Airlines in 1982, and that was where my airline career started. But I guess, aviation is quite a volatile industry. So I was in and out of airlines a little bit for companies going broke or for one reason or another. So it really taught me that how to stand on my own 2 feet. And I ended up building my own career in a variety of ways, which we'll probably discuss throughout our chat.
Yeah, thank you for that. You had a time where the engine shut off mid-flight. I loved your storytelling on that. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that one?
Yes, that was that's right. We were flying Townsville to Brisbane one night in a freight aircraft. That's right. And it's the sort of thing you think only happens to someone else. Well, no, it doesn't, And it was then that we have 2 fire extinguishers per engine, basically. the initial startle, if you like, of that engine stopping is one thing, but then we started the procedure from memory. Well, it didn't go according to the book because halfway through that, then the fire started. We fired one fire extinguisher. You have to wait a very long 30 seconds, fire the second one, and it still didn't go out. So we knew that was serious now. So we didn't have any of the good charts and maps things. We just had the old paper ones. And luckily, I was familiar with the area, and we ended up going to Proserpine, but it was a little bit like a Tom Cruise. We're going to look back on it, Danette, because through that flight, I needed to get down and have a look to check out what the status was of the fire in the engine, and went down through the side of the airplane inside. There's some containers in there. Climbed down through it. Luckily, I was fairly thin in those days, and sneak down beside it and have a look out, and then find my way back up to the flight deck and get the aircraft on the ground as quickly as possible, which we did. In those days, it was 1986, and in those days, of course, there was no such thing as mental health, attention post that. So, next day back to work, well, that doesn't happen these days.
Ouch. Now, you did mention you had done some work in counselling, so let's go to the mental health side of this, because you have a chapter in your book on it. You share great info for leaders and future leaders, so share some of your thoughts around mental health.
I've always adored flying, but I adored working with people just as much. And I found that there was so much unnecessary stress, particularly, say, simulator assessments and everything we do in aviation, that a lot of it just wasn't necessary, or people could unintentionally turn a test, if you like, from a standards test to a pressure test. And they're two different things unnecessarily. And then I found that there was a lot of stress. And of course, I'd experienced it myself, but people would start to open up. So I went back to study again in the counselling field. And I sort of built my own job, Danette, and so over the last 15 years or so, I was working heavily. We were right in the forefront of the change.
Yep.
And so, it took a little bit of convincing, but I convinced one of our forward-thinking CEOs that we needed to do this, and we did. And at that time, I was working with Jetstar. We were operating in Japan and Singapore and New Zealand and here and Vietnam. Through various mechanisms, when we started the Japanese company, Jetstar company up there, I was asked to go to Kuala Lumpur and train the people because I was in an examining role. I got to know the Japanese pilots really well and our common interests. And through that, a lot of a Japanese psychologist, Keiko Nakahama, and we decided we would try and set up a mental health program in Japan,
Nice.
which was unheard of because that it's not really spoken about.
Yep.
So it took a couple of years, and it just took off. Honestly, I said to the CEO then, this could take a while, but it didn't. I was wrong. In 12 months, it just accelerated, and now it's setting a bit of a stand up there now. So, but yes, there were some lessons to learn. Running peer support programs, there's a lot of talk about that now. That was so satisfying. But after a lot of experience, I guess, doing it, I felt there was something missing, because everything we were doing, all the education we were providing for our peer supporters, I thought, well, this, why is it just for us? It should be for everybody.
Yeah.
So I took a bit of a radical step, I guess, and our 6 monthly meetings at the Qantas group, instead of just the 25 peer supporters, I opened it up to any staff member to come along and invited the CEO and the heads of department. Well, I couldn't believe it. We got 100 people just come voluntarily in the days off, and it just accelerated so much. And we weren't just talking about anxiety and depression and those things. We would talk about the things that would degrade mental health on a daily basis, or engagement on a daily basis in companies.
Yep.
For example, exaggeration. That happens a lot in companies. It's human nature. But I would ask the question of the audience, is it harmless, normal, Is it just a bit mischievous, or is it downright deceitful?
Yeah.
And we would all discuss this because I was really interested in people self-reflecting and thinking, well, hang on, maybe I'm doing it or I recognise it. And of course, it can be really harmful and dangerous to people.
Yeah.
Other topics I found so interesting. I asked the audience, do you think there's a difference between resilience and tolerance? And could one be actually dangerous? And we all deemed that, yes, it could. We could be too tolerant, resilient, but too tolerant of not good things, say, in the workplace or
Yes.
at home. Yeah,
Yep.
TV, for example. So it's not always good to be tolerant. It's bad for us too sometimes. The most interesting question, Danette, I used to pose was, what in the world do you think is the world's biggest problem to you? And when you state that, or someone else states it, don't worry so much about what they say, but what it does to you, what emotional effect it has on you. For example, if I said to you, the world's biggest problem for me was the dog barking next door, not climate change or anything, would that devalue me in your eyes? Could you work with me in the workplace on a serious project or something like that? And from there, we would just discuss the fact that if someone else is affecting us, it actually tells us more about us than them.
Yes.
It's telling us that we've probably reached our limit with that type of person, that issue, or maybe I haven't got high tolerance today and maybe I should hand over to someone else. So a lot of self-awareness, so it became, to be honest, probably the best engagement exercise of anything, because there was no status in the room. The CEO was there.
Yeah.
So we put it on steroids, if you like, Danette, and I just loved it.
I love that. Another chapter I liked from your book was how some businesses focus on just one KPI. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I really think, we're seeing a decline in the purely commercially oriented leadership. I think we're seeing that wind down.
Yep.
And that's not unhealthy, to be honest. People are expecting more. They want more, and they've every right to, I think.
Yeah.
And if you get it right, it actually supercharges the business, not degrades it. Yes, to me, the organisational charter, I really favour a much flatter structure than that. And far from disempowering people, it actually empowers more, and you can work with people and off them. So I tend to not to have people think about not just the boxes on the org charts, which are the specialists, and that's supposed to run our company, but focus on the lines, because the lines are actually reporting lines technically, where they actually should also be relationship lines. So we really want to do something in the company. I promote using what we call a genogram.
Yes.
So a genogram outside is, it's like a family tree of relationships, You can do that within companies and ask the right questions, and you'll find out what the true relationships are and whether people are actually holding other people back, whether some of the not so good traits, to climb up the corporate ladder are emerging by virtue of the steep corporate ladder.
Now, a little bit about your journey. I wanted to take you back to the beginning because I feel like we could cover a little more about your flying experience and sort of how you ended up where you ended up. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
I think I mentioned before, my mother was just such an inspiration to us all. She really was. And so she extracted the most out of life. And I guess that comes through in all of us. But for me, I just really enjoyed extracting everything I could out of my career. I absolutely loved it when I got my first command on the jet aircraft in Anton Airlines.
Yes.
I absolutely loved that because I could set the tone myself. And I love building that environment, that team environment, where everyone was working just so well together, and we have happy days, And when things were going awry, that people would feel really open to actually come and open up to you,
Nice.
And I learned a lot about that. So I love doing that. I actually had a number of wonderful experiences that would not have occurred had I not been out of work at times, when you had to sink or swim.
Yes.
So we spent a lot of time in New Guinea,
Nice.
introducing jet aircraft up there. We spent a lot of time in South Korea, where a lot of our training occurred. With the Jetstar group, I put my hand up, if you like, and end up starting up their companies or working with that group in New Zealand, Japan, and Singapore, Vietnam, yeah, all those things,
Nice.
and taking advantage of it. Uh, I tended to do the domestic flying most of the time because of our children and the family. I just wanted to be at home as much as possible. But then I did do the international work for some years, which I just adored, to be honest. I just love life.
Yes.
And you'll see in the book there are a couple of stories there. One is about my favourite place to go flying, and that is actually between Guam and Papua New Guinea. There's a spot right in there,
Yep.
which is the most beautiful on earth if the climate conditions are right. Where the clouds are like, I call it the kelp forest. They're like a kelp
Wow.
forest cloud, and you actually, about 3 in the morning when the moon lights right, and the clouds are there, we have to fly through them. The passengers don't know, but we're actually flying through them because they get a little bit bumpy to fly through.
Yep.
And it's just a magical experience, that it really is.
That sounds stunning. There was also a story you shared about someone taking pictures of your house that was your friend. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, that was my friend Hiro, and Hiro
Yes.
Asui. He
Yes.
was one of the Japanese pilots that we recruited, and we brought the Japanese pilots, 27 of them, down to Australia. The Australian public didn't know, actually, but they were flying on our network down here to train them and examine them. And we just didn't get them to give PAs because the local Australians might have thought, who's flying up the front. Great pilots. And I got to know this one in particular. And so, well, I just finished assessing him and passing him. You want to come around for dinner to our place? And before I actually stopped the car, I mean, we have an old Queensland house here. It's not that
Yes.
large, but to him, it looked massive. And it wasn't, it was an old, a rundown house we were doing up. Before I stopped the car, he couldn't believe it. He jumped out. And I said, hey, I've got to stop the car. No, you don't understand. You don't understand. Can I take photos? Yeah, you can take photos. It's a house with a yard and an old place, timber place. He was just taken aback by it. And what to him was a huge house. It was
Yes.
not so here. That family, they come and stay with us now. They're from Japan. They've got their two little girls, and they, because they live in very small places in Japan, and I've got to know them very well. Tiny little places. Well, they just thought they were at Buckingham Palace, I think. So we bought them a little scooter, and they'd be, around the veranda here, and they just couldn't believe the freedom. And one, when she was little, it was the first time she started walking in our house because she had the freedom to get up and do it. But Hiro he was really the instigator into me commencing the mental health program in Japan.
Yep.
Because he'd done the big three. He'd had a marriage breakdown. He'd lost his job when Japan Airlines went broke, and he had a bad motorcycle accident, and he almost lost his leg there. So
Wow.
he was the one who was so interested in what I was doing, and he's like he's a family member to us now.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, that's prompted me to ask, what made you want to write a book in the first place?
The main driver, Danette, was my kids. I wanted to write it for my kids,
Beautiful.
really, because as a parent, I think there's a lot your children don't know about you, and they don't ask you about you a lot. So hang on, there's a lot more to me than just dad going to
Yes.
work or mum, whatever it may be.
Yes.
And I really wanted to write down those experiences, not to give advice, but to give of my experiences. So the book is autobiographical in its leadership sense. So I really wrote it for them. I took some extended time off work before I really finished up, and I thought, here we go, I'm going to write, and I just loved it. And all the lessons that others had taught me, and
Yes.
what I picked up. And I believe we can learn experience. I think
Yes.
we can. That was my main driver, to be honest, for the children.
And what are some of the key takeaways that you want your children to instill?
Yeah, there's a lot. I found that I was better able to take on responsibility at a younger age than I gave myself credit for, put it that way.
Yes. Yep.
And I think that's important to back yourself earlier. I actually find that there are certain people I admire, and I'll I think they think about their legacy earlier than others. So I think it's important for people to think about how they want to be remembered.
Yep.
Do they want to be remembered as with respect of the masses, or just a few around you? There are very few leaders, I think, who do both. And if I'll pick some out, maybe Barack Obama does that, whether we agree with his politics or not. Other people, Mahatma Gandhi does that. Nelson Mandela did that. But there are others, who we don't necessarily put in the leadership basket, but that would be like Fred Hollows
Yes.
or David Attenborough.
Yep.
Those people commit their life to certain things.
Yep.
The other thing, a couple of others, the real power is in humility. It really is. It does not equal weakness.
Yes.
If we look at power or authority versus, say, influence, we only have power or authority by virtue of a role or a title. And we soon find out how well we've done, how well we've treated people when we no longer have the role.
Yes.
If we've done a poor job, then they won't give us the time of day when you pass them in the street because we don't have control over them anymore. If you've done a good job, we'll have something better, and that's influence, and that's permanent.
Yes.
And really, it's the people who have the humility to not forget where they came from and to stay away from the strict hierarchy. They're the ones who are the real, true leaders.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is there is grey, and a lot of it. So we have black, we have white sometimes, but there's more grey, and it's a valid colour, if you like.
Yes.
And that's what makes us human. But if you learn to accept that and treasure it, that's where you can really make strides. And that leadership really is not about us. It's not about you or me. It's about everybody else. That's if we think about that. I think that's really important to remember some of those things.
Great insights. That reminds me of part 2 of the book, which is about who are your crew. What parts or people of that section would you like readers to pay attention to?
Yes, they are people who are everywhere, Danette, and they're right in amongst us the whole time. And when I make my conference presentations or do any corporate presentations, I really want people to relate to that and to feel safe about that, and to know that we know you're out there, right in this room, right in this audience now, because they're everywhere. And from a counselling perspective, that's why you see it. Yes, there are a number of people I put in there who some change the world, and others are just everywhere. And they are. I want them to feel safe to be themselves. And if we know that someone else has been through something or experienced it, it gives us confidence to think, we're not alone here. I get it. So they either recognise themselves or part of themselves within it, or if they find themselves in a situation they'll remember it. I think the two main ones really would be Oscar and Juliet.
Yes.
Now I have grandchildren now, and I have 2 girls and a boy of my own, and they've been brought up to believe that they can do anything they want in life without being pigeonholed anywhere and stereotyped.
Yes.
And that, but to be streetwise enough to know that the whole world isn't there yet. We get that. But Oscar is essentially a man, I guess, and he is from a fairly traditional family unit.
Yes.
But the world pressures are on him. He just doesn't speak, doesn't talk about it. So, and I've seen more and more and more Oscars in my life. So between about 35, 40 years of age to sort of 60.
Mm-hmm.
But it is building up on Oscar all the way until he can't cope anymore. And it just shouldn't be. We need to be more cognizant of what we are applying to people, much more humanistic. And in society, we're building a society, not a business, Yes. So Oscar worries me a lot. because he just doesn't talk. Now, are you okay is a wonderful implementation, if you like, but it's done a great job of raising the mental health issue. But I think that there's a part missing to get to that point. We should be asking, tell me about you, because are you okay to an Oscar will receive an answer, yeah, I'm fine, when he's actually not. He's not fine
Yes.
at all. Juliet, I call, so he's the unspoken man. Juliet is the unheard woman. Juliet comes in all sorts of forms, and she can be of any age.
Yes.
She could be 99, she could be, 15. But I find that, it's not just about equality. It's about true respect for people being free to be themselves. And I find that the Juliets of the world are feeling like they've got to prove themselves all the time. They've got to be just better, just to be heard. But people aren't hearing Juliet. They think they are, but they're not. And if we try to solve the problem, a problem for Juliet, that makes it worse, because then she knows you're not hearing her. She
Yes.
wants you to hear the visceral, how she's feeling about things she's experiencing. And so we need to be learning more about scratching the surface with our conversations, just a little bit, not so deep that it scares people away, but just to allow them to speak and to know they are heard. And the Juliets of the world, commonly if something happens in a workplace, they'll say, okay, let's give her some time off and she'll be fine. Well, what? So she has to change to be acceptable to us? I don't think so. No, she doesn't. She doesn't have to change like that. We need to be changing to be to understand what Juliet's going through and really sense it. So I like to talk to males in particular about that.
Yes.
About the Juliets of the world. They're probably too. But as you know, there are numerous other people within that chapter 2 or part 2 that I think are very important for people to read. And there are others. I'll write some more one day and put some more in.
Nice. Yeah, that Oscar story really hit me. What's your advice for people who want to be the best leader they can be?
I think initially we could ask ourselves what it is that motivates us. Why do we want to be a leader? And be really brutally honest with ourselves. Do I want money? Do I want power? Do I want to change the world? Actually, what is it that I really want? Because if we don't, and ask ourselves, every few years or whatever it may be, because ultimately, what if we want to be a CEO, we get there and it's not what we expected? Then, do I really want this? That's not what I had in mind.
Yes.
Think a little bit more deeply about that without driving ourselves, crazy about things.
Yes.
That the world is not perfect. We need to be able to bend. We don't have to break, because at times in a very competitive environment, we will find that there are a lot of pressures. And think, well, that's against my value system right here. But we've got to play today's game, not yesterday's as well. Today's can be pretty forthright and aggressive like that. But bending, it's good for you too to not break. 'Cause if you break, then that really does something to you internally, doesn't it? But okay, I get that, to bend because we want a result. I really like to focus on mechanisms to work within a team. I really don't talk teams a lot anymore, Danette. I talk community, and the language we use is very important. So I don't talk about generations that much anymore. I talk about era, because I think we talk too much about generation, then we tend to generate the differences.
Yes.
So there, I'll pick out one, if I may,
Of course,
because I need my crew to be able to speak up to me, no matter what I think. If there's an emergency on, I want to hear it. I want them to feel free to come up and say, Chris, I'm hearing this, or I don't know what's going on here. I really want that. It's very, very important to understand how to create that environment, even if there are people who we may not gel with that well. I mean, that's just life. It's the use of what I term the paradox. So the paradox, as I term it, is accepting someone else's right to their view, even if it's totally counter to ours. It might be obnoxious to us, because if you accept their right to their view, that is the moment that you will generate the potential for them to start working with you, to agree with you. They feel respected by you at least.
Yes.
I mean, the big negotiators are doing this around the world all the time. I think they know they can't solve a lot of the problems, but they have to get a result.
Yes.
They need to get people talking. And sometimes the answer is there is no answer. The answer is you keep talking. That is your answer.
Love that. This has been great, Chris. Do you have anything else you'd like to share with the viewers or listeners?
I'm often asked what I think is the world's greatest problem.
Yes.
To me, I'll tell you, I think it is damaging argument. I would like to, and I hope my book's gone some way to doing that, is to stop the unnecessary argument that occurs in the House, in workplaces, and our political leaders. We've got to change the dialogue that's going on there because a lot of it's creating unnecessary problems.
Yes.
And I feel if we could genuinely educate our younger people and our older who are willing to listen, how to accept other people's view, to get on with them, we would get rid of so many world problems. It would be, fantastic. So that really is my leaning right now. It really is to try and solve some of that.
I love that. And your book definitely starts with that and helps with that. So I'd love to thank you, Chris Smith. Leadership at 43,000 feet. Absolutely recommend it. We're going to do a video book review and send this out to our newsletter, and we'll share it on social media as well. Chris, if people were wanting to reach out and make contact with you, where are the best places?
I have a website, aculturalleadership.com. It's got my email in there, but the email is aculturalleadership@gmail.com. And I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. So I'd love to hear from people. Thank you very much, Danette.
Oh, thank you, Chris. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have you back for another podcast because this has been such a delightful conversation. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time to write that book, because there were a lot of really unique, from me, and I read a lot in leadership, unique, really good messages that were based on your experience and your sharing. So really appreciate that you took the time to write that book, because it actually is an amazing book. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Danette.
And I'll give you a hug because everyone knows I give hugs.
I'll accept that too.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.